For neurodiverse children in British Columbia, there are few options within the educational system, camps, play options. If your child has ADHD, they often fall through the cracks. I can't speak to other neurodiverse conditions such as autism, but I can speak to ADHD as my son, my 6-year-old Grayson, was diagnosed last year. I am excited to have a woman on the podcast today by the name of Koryn Heisler. She is the founder and owner of This World's Ours, a play and support center that's a safe, supportive, fun environment for all children, including those who are neurodiverse. My son has played there and one-on-one sessions with a wonderful professional who understands neurodiversity and whom he trusts. He has learned. He walks out of there with his chin held high. Today, I am proud to welcome to Rachel Thexton Connects, the owner and founder of This World's Ours, here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Koryn Heisler. So today, I'm really excited to have someone on the podcast. It's a unique guest. She is a woman with a wealth of knowledge, and she also owns and has founded a center that is really one of its kind. And it's called This World's Ours Center. Her name is Koryn Heisler, and I'd like to welcome her today to Rachel Thexton Connects. Welcome, Koryn.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on today.
Of course. I feel like it could not be a timelier discussion. And, you go to the library and all the books are checked out on neurodiversity and ADHD. The wait lists for schools that may be more appropriate for children who are neurodiverse are full. And from what I hear from nonprofit clients, they are getting calls day and night from parents wanting support. Now, this doesn't just mean children who are, acting out incredibly and throwing things at the wall. It may mean just a child who needs a different way of learning. And I just wanted to introduce that. And I'm going to let you take the stage, Koryn, because you're the expert. You have this wonderful center. I usually don't start the episodes this way, but I feel like people really do need to know what This World's Ours Center is all about. So can you tell us about the center, what kind of place it is, and the kind of programming that you offer there?
For sure, I'd love to. So This World's Ours is an inclusive center in the heart of Vancouver. We've been open for just a little over 2 years now. And our goal is to provide a safe social space for neurodiverse children and their families. So the kinds of programs that we offer, we do a kids club, which is an after-school program. We offer small social skills programs with a maximum of 4 students. We do a cooking class. We have one-on-one sessions with the trained staff. We run camps during school breaks, so winter, spring, summer break, as well as professional development days. We do Parents' Night Out on Fridays, as well as one of our most popular and waitlisted programs, which is Dungeons and Dragons. Which
Really?
Yep. And I don't know a whole lot about it, but the kiddos that come for it love it. And yeah, always one of the most popular. So we kind of try to do the programming that's more on the fun recreational side of things. So we're trying to fill the gap and offer programs that aren't always available for our children, and to do so through a play-based lens. And as well, we also offer access to a variety of therapy and service providers at our space. We're trying to make it so that families feel comfortable here and can access everything that they need in one spot. So we have providers such as speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physio. We just signed on a neuromovement practitioner, counselors, art therapists, music therapy. We do have one psychologist that's offering psych eds out of the space. behavior consultants, as well as tutors. And then lastly, we also offer birthday parties and events. And these are mostly as a community building activity, and to get people in our space and seeing what we do.
Amazing. I want to back you up and to you and I, and just so everyone knows, I think most people do, but my 6-year-old has ADHD, so he's neurodiverse. He is diverse in many ways, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But there are some who may not know what neurodiversity is. So can you just break down what that means? And I know that you're not a doctor, but you certainly know a lot about this. You have a lot of education and experience. So if you could break that down, that would be wonderful.
For sure. So when we use the term neurodiverse, we're also referring to like a person with a disability, or a person who maybe thinks a little bit differently than kind of what the neurotypical person might. So often we're looking at people with a variety of diagnoses. So like ADHD, we tend to get a lot of families with children with autism in our space. It can mean an intellectual disability, physical disability, anything along those lines. So typically somebody needing a little bit of additional support.
And what inspired you? I know on your website or maybe in your bio, you talk about your children. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you a little bit about my family. So my husband and I have been together for 15 years now. And
Congratulations. Sorry.
Thank you. Oh goodness. Yeah. And we have 3 children. And so my oldest is 14, and he was born in 2010. And then we had another child quite quickly after in 2011. And my husband and I had always decided that we were going to have 2 biological children. And if we wanted to add to our family, we would do so through adoption. So we went down the adoption path through the foster system here in BC, and we adopted our daughter, Devon. And we adopted her when she was 2 years old. And so I had 3 kids under 5 at one point. And our social worker, when we were going through the adoption process, said, "We think she'd be a good fit because she reminds us so much of your middle child." And we're like, "Oh, wow, okay."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're like, "Oh, there's that similarity there." And we laugh about it now because about a year after that, maybe 2 years, my middle child was diagnosed with autism, and a couple other anxiety and epilepsy and other diagnoses. And then about a year after that, our daughter was diagnosed with autism. And she also has epilepsy and an intellectual disability. And she's my one with ADHD. And so we kind of joke, so we're like, "Oh, okay, we see the similarities now." But yeah, so between my kids, we got a total of 10 diagnoses within those couple of years.
Wow, that must have been overwhelming.
Incredibly. I think there's times where I don't even remember
Yes.
parts just because you're so in it and you're running every moment of the day. But yeah, so I had my family. I was teaching as well. But the main reason was, so I put my daughter into an inclusive camp when she started school. I was a teacher, so I had summers off, but I needed a little bit of time for myself, right? And so, when you put a child that's neurodiverse into a camp, you do ridiculous amounts of paperwork. And I attended the meetings and I did all of the planning to get her there. And not an hour into camp, I got a phone call.
Yes, of course.
And it was "You got to come, you got to get her." And I showed up and I was like, what's happening? And they had gone to Stanley Park and the kids were on the playground and my daughter wanted to be on the beach and she wasn't following the group plan and she wasn't allowed to stay. And I remember thinking there has to be something better.
Yeah.
This was the inclusive option.
Yes.
And it didn't work for my kids. So around that time, I was also struggling with like an alignment of my values and working in the school district and having kids with
Yeah,
disabilities.
I bet.
So I started dreaming. So this is kind of the product of needing something and also needing something like for my kids, but also for me professionally as well.
It's what year was this approximately, or how many years ago
Oh,
approximately?
goodness. She would have been maybe 5 or 6, and she's 11 now. So probably about 5 years, 6 years ago.
Okay, so we're 5 or 6 years ago. Um, I'm navigating the waters. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a fierce but fair. Try to be fair until things, become
Yeah.
unmanageable, especially when it comes to my children. Advocate. And I feel as though not a lot has changed from what you're describing. Your center has been a gift for us. A gift. Hi. Anyway, I'm going to leave that one till later. But yes, I see where you're coming from. And
Yeah.
I can only imagine with 3 children. We have 3 as well, but
Yeah.
our 6-year-old is the child who is neurodiverse. I always struggle to find what term to use because
Yeah.
what is typical and what should be typical, and should we be adapting to this world? I mean, should
Yeah.
we? It's a bit toxic at times. And anyway, we could go on forever, but
Yeah.
I have lots of things I want to ask, so I'll move on. So you turned your dream into reality. Um, for those who may not know as much about ADHD, and the reason I focus on ADHD for 2 reasons. I'm slightly selfish because my son has it and I'm interested in your answers, I'll be honest. But also, I feel as though children with ADHD sometimes fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
They don't often meet the requirements of certain funding for programming. They're not seen as perhaps extreme enough at times. Yet they struggle because they can't do the crisscross applesauce at school. Should they be anyway? But anyway,
Yeah.
they often can't. And regulating their emotions can be tricky for some. It shows up differently in everyone. But can you break down ADHD in simple terms so that people can really have an understanding? And as I said, I know it shows up differently in every child, every brain, but if you could just run through that, I'd love it.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm coming at this through my experience with ADHD. So my daughter has a diagnosis as well as my husband just got one a couple of years ago. It is one of the most common disorders affecting children right now. So we are seeing it quite a lot more in the school system and in society. And it tends to be categorized by 3 different areas. You might not meet for all of them, but the key areas are inattention. So that's struggling to keep focused. So if you're a parent and you're kind of wondering what that looks like, we're talking about things like making careless mistakes, difficulty keeping your attention on a task, doesn't seem to listen when they're being spoken to, struggles to maybe follow through on instructions, difficulty organizing tasks. They might be reluctant to engage in something that would seem a little bit more challenging. Losing things
Yes.
necessary for a task, which is quite common, even for me.
Shoes on the wrong feet, even
Oh
when they
my
know how to do
goodness.
it. They know how to do it.
Constantly. I
They
just
just
let
don't
my
want to.
daughter, I just let her do it now. I'm like, your choice. Your choice.
Yeah.
Often being easily distracted and or forgetful. So like those are the main things in the inattention area that you're looking for. The other one is hyperactivity. So this one you may have, you may not, but we're talking about an excessive movement that's not fitting for the setting. So these are things like fidgeting, often leaving your seat in class when you're meant to be seated, running about or climbing things in a situation where you shouldn't be, difficulty doing something quietly.
Mhm.
And often we hear the description around like they're run by a motor or they're always on the go, as well as often talking excessively about something. And then lastly, the other key area is impulsivity. So the things that are, you're acting without thinking first. So these are, you're blurting out answers. You have trouble waiting your turn. I know as a teacher, the waiting in the lineup or what position you go in is often a really challenging one. And then the other one is often interrupting in a conversation. So those are the main things that we're looking for or talking about when we're talking about ADHD.
One of the things that stood out to me as you described that was the impulsivity piece. And that is because I don't know if you've noticed this with your children. I've spoken with other parents, and I've certainly seen it, as is my husband. My son will do something impulsively, such as say something that he doesn't mean.
Yep.
And then he'll realize what he said, and he'll feel horrible about it. And he'll actually negative self-talk. And I won't, I don't need to say what he says, but very negative self-talk. So an illustration that impulsivity is not a choice. It's actually something that they often regret very much.
Oh, my daughter all the time, she'll hit me and then she gets this look and goes, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." And it's that there's no thought, there's not a malicious intent. It's just a thought happens, we do it. And that part's really tricky. I was talking with a friend about it recently that works in the school system, and we were talking about ADHD, and she was saying that's the one part that they struggle with the most in the school system right now, is that impulsivity part and how to manage it within the school system. So, it makes sense when you think about it that would be, because you can't predict it. And it's hard to know how the follow-up from that when we know it's not happening with intent.
Yes, it is challenging. One of the things, I'm not here to hate on the school system. I think that most of the teachers, principals, and staff do the best with what they have.
Yeah.
And that there is a serious lack of resources. And there needs to be, and this is my opinion, and I'm not speaking for Koryn, I'm speaking for myself, there needs to be some serious attention given to ADHD by our Minister of Education and by all ministers of education throughout the country. They say that approximately 10% of children, but I think that we know that number's higher. Often young girls go undiagnosed for various reasons. They don't have hyperactivity, see it. This is something that needs attention now. And these are young people, and we're going through a mental health crisis, a drug emergency, and yet here we are with young people, and we're not at a prevention mode. And that is where my concern is. But what I want to ask you, Koryn, is when we come into the center and you're professionals, I don't know if you'd say the equivalent to what a child would see as a teacher, right? Because I see them as a teacher, a playmate, an adult playmate teacher.
Yeah.
There's something different. And as a parent of a child with ADHD, you see it. As a child, you see it. They just get it. They come down to their level. They know how to communicate with them. They just get it. And you can see it right away, and you feel comfortable turning around and walking out the door. And I rarely feel that way when I leave my son somewhere, because I can guess, and I'm probably right, that individual is not educated or does not have the tools they need to support a neurodiverse child. So how do you find these fantastic professionals who can, just get it?
This was one of my favorite questions.
I'm so glad you said that.
Because my staff are truly what makes this center special. It's the people in the space that make it. And I have been so incredibly fortunate to have these kind, caring, empathetic people that show up every day and give their best to the kids that walk through the door. How do I find them? I wish I knew. They tend to come from a variety of different backgrounds. So I have staff that maybe were speech and language pathologists in another country or have their teaching degree. I get a lot of people out of the school system. And I also have a fair number of staff that are in university trying to get into a field similar to this, like occupational therapy or medicine. But we were talking about this the other day as an admin team, and we were saying, we have our interview questions and, those things that like are must-haves and, experience. But we're like, there's just something like we know the second they walk through the door. Like it's the way they walk in, it's the way they greet us, it's the way they greet the kids and the parents in the space. It's just the way they exude this like warmth, welcoming feeling when they do. And it's such a silly thing, but like we had a staff that came in that we were interviewing, and just the way he walked in, we were like, oh my God, like this, he has it. Like he has it. This is the thing. And it's so important to me because I think, well, from my experience, parents of kids with disabilities don't often feel welcomed in all spaces in society.
Very much so. Yes, I agree.
And from my own personal experience, my middle kiddo kind of, I say burnt out of the public school system. We were starting to get sent home at like 5-10 minutes into the day. So it was no longer sustainable. So we moved them to a private school. And because of their behaviors, we did this really slow transition into the school. And I got a call one day. They were like, something's happened. We just need you to come down. It's okay. But, we just want to talk to you about it. And this was like our last resort. It's like I was going, oh my God, my kid can't get kicked out of here. Like, and the teacher came out with my child. And, she told me, she's like, got frustrated, maybe through some things. Just want to let you know. And she got down on her knee. She looked my child in the face and she said, I love you. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. And as a parent, I had never heard an adult in a position of authority like that tell my child how much they wanted them back, even after they'd done something that they shouldn't have.
Yeah, what a difference that makes.
And so I say to my staff all the time, that's our job. We need to be that for families. They need to hear the positive. They need to feel welcomed because they are not getting that anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So those are the people that I have. And so it's just like, I love watching them talk to parents and hearing the like positive stories they tell. And so my job is to try to make this a space they want to work at because they are incredible, incredible people.
They are. And I'm going to skip through where I thought I was going to go because this leads into one of my favorite services that you provide and my son's favorite. And that is the one-on-one sessions where my son comes once or twice a week. And your knowledgeable staff. And I said, I'm not going to name the professional because I don't want everyone to book his time, but I will because he deserves it. And there are many amazing professionals. But his name is Javier. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his name. He is fantastic. Yeah. My son has a lack of trust with 99.9% of adults who are not my husband and I, and has developed trust with Javier. And it means more to us than we can describe. I've said so to him as well. And that service, the reason that I like it is because, he has that playtime that we also talk about focus areas that we want to work on during that 2-hour time, one-on-one. As someone new coming with their child who is neurodiverse, whether ADHD or autism, or what would you say, what would you recommend as a service for someone coming for the first time to your center?
Yeah, so there's kind of two that parents tend to navigate towards for their first time. One of them is the kids club. And so that's typically if we're talking about parents that live in the community that are needing care after school. I'd say the one that gets the most buzz tends to be the Parents' Night Out. So that's a program we offer Friday evenings.
I wonder why that is.
Right? Like, it's meant to be fun. Like,
Yes.
Parents get a chance to go out. We're on Main and 10th in Vancouver. There's so many restaurants and patios and coffee shops and things to do around here. And the program's just, it's relaxed. It's fun. There's few demands. We often theme it. So they get to do, make pizzas or watch a movie or whatever it is. And I know even for myself, like the first year I opened the center, I joked, but I said, I've dated my husband more this year because of Parents' Night Out than I think I have in my entire marriage. And so for me, that part's important, that building that connection again with a family or husband or partner, or whoever it is, but to have that time. So
Can I
that
stop you there just for 1 second? Because I think I didn't think of that to ask you, but that's vital because I don't think very many people think of that, is that as parents, we're trying to parent our children, which can be challenging enough as it is. You have to focus on your marriage. That's the bedrock of your family.
Yeah.
And when you have a child who needs more attention, more support, a neurodiverse child, it can bring more stress. It can bring more, there's a lack of resources, so more frustration, maybe some differences of opinions and how things should be managed. So that Parents' Night Out is important. And any advice for parents who are just, they're not getting the time they need, or they're clashing on things because it's hard. It's hard. They love their child. There's nothing wrong with their child, but it's the way the system is, and it's just, the cards that have been dealt. So any thoughts on that?
Oh, that one is so hard. Even working on my own marriage within, this last year, it's making that time and that communication piece, like, especially when you're parenting kids with disabilities, like the amount of time that you actually have to connect with your partner over issues. Like, you get very good at the shorthand of like, here's this, we need to do this, we got to do that, fill out that form, do that thing. But I think it's so critical to build in those little bits of time for other things, for the fun things that you used to do before you had kids. And, it's not sitting doing paperwork, it's sitting and like, having a coffee and talking and doing that. I know this year we brought in a counselor in our marriage to like have that communication there with her, just to help build that up for us.
Good for you.
Because it's incredibly challenging. Parenting in and of itself is hard, but you add in kids with disabilities and extra needs, and it makes it even more challenging.
Thank you for that. I know that was an unexpected a question. I kind of put you on the spot there. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
So Parents' Night Out is a great one. And just so that everyone knows, and this is correct, Koryn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my daughter, who has not been diagnosed as neurodiverse, she may be, but she has not been diagnosed, attended with my son a couple of weekends ago, and she hasn't stopped talking about it since. She loved it. She had a blast. So everyone is welcome to join their sibling. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We don't require a diagnosis. What we've done is that we have built the space and designed the programs to support kiddos who need it the most, knowing that it will support all kids. So everybody's welcome. So diagnosis or not, or if you're not ready to share with us, that's fine too.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to ask you, again, advice for parents. My son is 6 and his struggles in school have been mostly due to emotional regulation and peers.
Yeah.
And this is something that can be tough. My personal opinion is that there's a lack of supervision during social time. So recesses and lunch breaks. And so we've come to the point where we pick him up for lunch break. there's hundreds of children and there's very few adults who are there. So they miss things. And neurodiverse children often need more supervision. And it may not be, they may be, doing things that are inappropriate, but there may be another child that's also treating them. My son was bullied and isolated in kindergarten, and that really, really affected him. And hurt me deeply and hurt him more. And then regardless of me, it's him that matters. Yeah. And I guess my question for you is, do you find that parents often come to you frustrated, seeking alternative schooling or options for their children and how they can get support separate from the traditional public school system who, they do the best with what they have?
Yeah. This is probably one of the things I talk to parents about the most. So it's one of the biggest complaints that I hear at the center. And it's one reason or another, but at some point, there's a lack of confidence in the school system. I think too, I remember when my kiddos were younger, I had the energy and I was, I hadn't been in it that long. So I had the ability to advocate and show up to the meetings and do that. But as my kids got older, it became exhausting to every year go in and have the same conversations over and over. And I don't think people realize that advocating, how draining it is.
It is.
I mean, it's so necessary. We will all do it. But it's very draining. And so parents are often looking for an alternative. Just before I got on with you, I was scrolling Instagram and I followed Down Syndrome BC. And they just came out with their study about some of the things that their parents were saying were concerns in education. And it was a lot of the same things we're talking about, like that lack of safety, lack of resources. They're noticing their kids are less included as they get older. EA support is, could be pulled. It may be changed on day to day. And also parents really nervous about the transition to high school, which my daughter is about 2 years away and I am terrified. And so for some of these reasons, we're seeing parents look for different schooling options. I've seen parents move school districts like you did. I've seen parents look into private school. We get parents homeschooling their kids.
Yeah.
And the other one that I didn't know a lot about until opening up the space was distributed learning. So parents are moving to that model.
And what's distributed learning?
Good question. It's very similar to homeschooling, except that in distributed learning, you're still being directed by a public's, like a BC certified teacher. They're still meeting provincial standards. They're going through ongoing assessments, report cards, all of that. Whereas homeschooling, some of that criteria is a little bit less, and the parents are taking on that role. I know for our families, because the funding then goes to distributed learning, they can use the funding to access some of our programs. So that's how we're seeing those kids in the space.
Okay.
And a lot of the reasons and conversations that I'm having with parents, and from my own experience, is that you can have a really good teacher or a really good administrator one year, but that might not be the case the next year. Yeah. And that's the part that is so challenging. I mean, along with the lack of funding, the lack of resources, we know that. And I'm like you, I was a teacher. I have friends that are teachers and educators. I do like to think they are doing the very best they can within the system. But I think our system's designed to help the average child.
Yes.
And I would love to see a system designed to help our most vulnerable, because we know that would support every kid in the world.
I think that's a great point. And my other question that I think we should all think about is, what is the average child? Right?
I mean, really?
Because I think that, there are so many different ways of learning, and we wonder why kids are not always succeeding. They may not be neurodiverse, but they may have epilepsy. They may have traumas. They may have things going on at home. They may have anxieties. They may have, the list goes on and on. our school system is due for some changes.
Yeah.
I was, how fun would it be to learn how to add with sticks and rocks out in the forest versus sitting quietly in a room watching a clock tick with a paper and a pencil? And that's for all children, right? We're still learning, but we're learning interactively. And it doesn't cost a dime. So I think it's ways to incorporate that. And I have a lot of opinions on that. And what you said about advocacy is key. I don't love being an advocate. It is exhausting. It is emotional. It takes away from time I need with my family. But I feel like I have to do it because I'm built that way and because I care about the issues and I feel like they need to change. And what you say, I've never heard anyone say that being an advocate is exhausting, and it is. So thank you for acknowledging that. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure to many other listening. Koryn, you have a master's degree in education and worked as a teacher in the public school system. Now, that's a unique flip. Can you tell me what that experience was like when it came to neurodiverse students? Were you knowledgeable at the time about neurodiversity and ways to support those children? And can you tell me a little bit about that?
Short answer, no. So when I started teaching, I just had my bachelor's in education. I graduated university. I knew how to write a lesson plan, some very basic classroom management skills, which are probably very outdated now, and like curriculum specific information. The only experience I had with people with disabilities was through my own lived experience. I have an older sister who has a profound intellectual disability and is autistic. So I was using that knowledge to bring into my teaching. I started my career teaching grade 3-4, and when I moved to Vancouver shortly after, I got a job as a life skills teacher. It was where I wanted to be, but to be very honest, at the time, it was the only job in education that you could get as a first-year teacher. It was the only thing available, which when you think about it, we're talking about our kiddos that need the most support, and we're putting the people with the least amount of experience.
Yes.
So from there, I went on and I got two postgraduate degrees. So I did get a degree in ELL as well as special ed, just to get some more knowledge myself. But it really felt like I was just doing my best within a system that didn't have a lot. The burnout was fast. There kept being more students added to the classroom, less support put in. There was very little money for resources or teaching materials. And then once I had my own children and started to realize that my kids had extra needs and were going to need extra support, I really, really struggled with that discrepancy between what I wanted for my kids as a parent and for what I knew I could do within the system. Like it was like with Zoe, like I was getting calls after 10 minutes and I knew as a teacher, I knew what they were looking at. I knew they had a classroom composition that had multiple kids with disabilities. I knew they didn't have resources, but as a parent, I definitely wanted better for my kid.
Yeah.
So I then went back and got my master's in education after, and shockingly never actually taught after I got it. I then went into this because I needed my values to align with what I was doing every day.
But all the knowledge the masters gave you, right, for what you're doing now, right? So you're still using it, I would think, very
I hope
much.
so.
Yes, very much. It's what you said was really moving about the teacher saying, "I love you. I can't wait to see you tomorrow." My son was angry about something a couple of days ago. I was describing it to my husband, and he said, "I only love you a little bit, Mommy." And I said, "Well, I love you a lot." He was still mad. "I love you a medium amount." I said, "Well, I love you a lot." And then he was, still angry. And then as I heard him walking out of the room, he said, "I love you a lot, Mommy." And he walked out. And it's one of those things that I think again illustrates, it's not easy. I'm not trying to simplify it, but some of the things are just letting a child know that they're accepted. And when my son walks out of your center, this world, ours, his chin is held high. He feels confident. He feels like he's accepted. He's a beautiful, funny, amazing dancer, has talents, is awesome. Of course, he's my child. I'm going to go on forever. But what I'm trying to say is that, that's because he is receiving acceptance. He feels accepted, and he feels like he's great just the way he is. And I do think schools do what they can, but I do know of a fantastic preschool teacher, and she teaches in North Burnaby, and she has taken it upon herself to do her own learning because she wants to learn about neurodiversity, about children with special needs. And my son had a fantastic preschool experience, had absolutely no issues. It's only when he entered the elementary school system. So sometimes I do wonder, if you're working with children, can we spend, maybe a few hours a year doing a course on, some of them are free. I'd be happy to go put up flyers and show you where they are, about neurodiversity and about ADHD, because there are ways to learn that are inexpensive to free. And that is something that I think that teachers, until the school system improves, which it needs to, and I know teachers are very overwhelmed and exhausted. I get that. Well, I'm not a teacher, but I can only imagine. But I do think that taking it upon themselves to have a little bit of learning is important and should be done.
Yeah.
If you're passionate about being a teacher.
Yeah.
So neurodiversity, ADHD, they're not new, but news lately tells us that diagnoses are increasing, even amongst adults. I think there was some data from Manulife, from one of the insurance companies, saying that prescriptions for ADHD have skyrocketed. They even went through a shortage.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on why this may be?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that, because my husband was diagnosed just a couple of years ago. And I have a fair number of friends that as adults have gone back to get a diagnosis. Much of it is just wanting to have an understanding of who they are, and explaining some of their life experiences, and understanding that they weren't just bad. I know for my husband, he was like, there's such a sense of relief when he was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I know what was going on. And I think a lot of that is because, first of all, there's more access to healthcare and services now. I think parents are a lot more aware of what to look for, the symptoms, as well as I think our clinicians are getting more aware, which is also an important piece of, especially parents with kids with disabilities. We've got to find our people, and find the doctors and professionals that understand and work for us. I also think one of the biggest reasons is that there seems to be a decrease in stigma around having a diagnosis now. I know when I've talked to my husband and some of my friends, a lot of it was that there wasn't a stigma around having a medical diagnosis, but the thought of having a mental health diagnosis back when we were kids, there was stigma there for parents. Whereas now, for me personally and for my family, it's important for me to know, I want to know what my kids have so I know how to support them. And so I think a lot of parents are starting to to reach out and ask for that little bit of extra help for their kids. And it puts things into perspective too.
It's a great answer. I had never thought of it that way. One of my guests on the podcast, he's an adult. His name is John Weave, and he's a digital content creator, otherwise known as people may call them influencers. Very successful male influencer who has ADHD. And he said and I don't want to quote him, but I'll paraphrase what he said on the podcast. He started taking medication after his diagnosis of ADHD. And he described the feeling of medication a day or two in as, for once, not feeling badly about himself, or something along those lines. I don't want to quote him, but something along those lines. And that, wow, what an important, to feel badly about yourself or to feel negatively about yourself and then not, what a switch.
Oh, I know my husband can tell, like, if he misses a day without medication, the anxiety and the bad self-talk is so real on those days. So like the impact of the medication for him has been, I'm going to be really honest, it was a game changer for our marriage. And for him personally, it just helped. I was opening a business and I was like, I'm not going to be here. You now are the primary parent. I need you to be able to do all the mental load and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I think knowing about his ADHD, having the medication for it, he does it. It's on him now. He can take all that responsibility and do all of that. And I trust that he has it. And I think there's confidence there too for him as well.
Good for him, because it as you know, it can be hard for men to stand up and say. And John, I encourage you to and everyone listening to listen to John Weave's episode as well. I believe it's one of the first episodes of season 2 where he speaks about his adult diagnosis. And, there is no shame in it. I hate to break it to you all, but we all have our own brain issues, and we all could use a little bit of therapy and a little bit of support. We're living in a really complicated world. Yeah. And John speaks to that, and kudos to your husband, because it is, as a male, there is a bit more, stigma, just toughen up and no, not we, that's not a way to live, and that's not a way to have a healthy family and marriage and be a healthy man. So that's amazing. As a parent, I'm wondering if you have any tips, and I know that this could go on forever and they don't all suit everyone, but any key ones that you find are important that you think most families could benefit from if they have a child with ADHD?
Yeah, I'll give you the top ones that we do in our family. We have kids with multiple diagnoses. One, we realized it took us a long time to figure this out, but just setting clear expectations for us as a family, specifically over the weekends, was huge. We were ending every weekend. I was defeated. Everybody was upset. No one got to do the things they wanted to do. And so we finally sat down one weekend and it was like, okay, what is one thing everybody wants out of this weekend? And everybody, I want to sit and have a cup of coffee and 20 minutes apiece. And my kid wants to go skateboarding, and another one wants an hour of video games. Whatever it is, we put those things on a schedule. And then at the end of the weekend, even if we didn't do anything else, but everybody just got to do that one thing that they were looking for, was massive, because there was no more disappointment. We knew that that was a priority for each of us. So as a family, that was a big one that we did. The other is just an access to a variety of sensory materials. I kind of joke my home looks like a magazine for a sensory material store.
Yes.
There is stuff everywhere.
Can you explain what a sensory, just so the average person may know?
Yeah, so sensory materials are things like swings, or we're talking soft furniture or fidget toys, things that can bring your energy levels up, like jumping on a trampoline, or things that can help bring your energy levels down, like lying on a crash pad or a bean bag, or having lights or something you can touch around you. I know for me as a parent, because we've had so many diagnoses and I've even with my background, have needed a lot of support in like what's going to work. I walk the block now to Odin Books, and I show up there and I go, here's the problem. And I go, can you please direct me to something? So we've just bought lots of those things and brought them into our house. We've normalized it, ways to get out your energy. We were joking the other night because we were downstairs in our basement, and I noticed all the pot lights were hanging off, like out of the ceiling. I said to my husband, I'm like, what is going on? Like, why are all the pot lights up? He's like, I don't know what's happening, but they keep falling. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. We're fixing them all. Not a couple minutes later, my daughter goes jumping across the main floor, and all the pot lights just fall out of the ceiling.
So they need to get that energy out.
Yeah. And we're like, okay, well, this is what she needs. This is what's going to happen. So, making room, space for those things, normalizing it. And the last one, and it's not a parenting strategy, but it's important for me, is building that community around my family. Having those people that love me, love my kids. I can show up in a whirlwind of a mess and they welcome me into their home. Having that sense of feeling connected and grounded with people it's big. It refills my cup so that I can go back home and be the parent that I want to be.
Yes. Great tips. I'm going to include all of those tips on my next post promoting the episode, because I think they're all really important. I'm going to share one of my own just because I have 3 children and 2 of them are not neurodiverse that we know of. And so one of the things I was going to say is one-on-one time with each child. So sometimes perhaps a non-neurodiverse or an atypical? How do we call them?
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical. Okay. Neurotypical child could feel left out because they feel like the neurodiverse child is getting all the support and attention and love. And actually, we don't love them more. We know we just are having to fight for them, right? So advocating that time to them, which I'm sure is advice you would give if you had, if you were in the same situation as me. I try to spend time one-on-one with my other children as well.
That was, now that you mention it, that was critical when my kids were little. Like we used to set up little dates with each of them just so that we had that chance to connect. And I mean, my kids are a little bit older now, so there's a little bit more like self-sufficiency there. But yeah, when they were little, it was important because we got less time with our oldest child than the other 2. So
yeah. So many questions, and I know that we're running out of time. Just a couple more for you. So there are various schools of thoughts, lots of books, tons of them, different doctors, different opinions. Where does it come from? Why is it happening? Yep. What do we do to fix it? Not everyone's right. Not everyone's wrong. I don't know. My thinking is that you can take a little bit from everywhere and you can leave a little bit from everywhere. I don't know if you agree. How can parents navigate all this information? It's quite overwhelming.
I mean, I remember getting my kid's diagnosis and you get that massive report with, 15, 20 pages of recommendations. I went to work and I went straight back to work after that meeting. I was talking with a coworker and she was like, Koryn, give yourself a little bit of time. Like you need some time to process this right now, especially in the beginning. And then get to it when you have the space and energy to deal with it. Which I think is important because I think we tend to just dive right in and like, okay, I got to solve this. I got to, get all these things in place. But it was important to just take that time before I dived in. And it's about finding those things you learn about in university, finding those evidence-based approaches. Find your people and your professionals, and what works for me might not work for you, and that's okay. I think at the end of the day, it's that we know our kids, right? We know our families, we know what we need. And really, really understanding that we're the experts on our child.
Yes.
I mean, it's critical. And I mean, there's so many people that you can look up online. And so I kind of just, I do what you do. Like I read a little bit and, I take this or I follow this person. I go, okay, that's really cool information. And I add that in. But it's really doing what's right for your family, whether that be research, medication, whatever it is, it's building your team and people around you with what aligns with your values.
Yes. And I have to say that we've learned through bringing our son to your center, we've learned so much about through his one-on-one sessions, through things that really bother him or really thrill him.
Yeah.
Because he's in a play environment where it's maybe a natural way and his and Javier knows how to incorporate those things where they're natural versus us sitting and asking where he's never gonna, want to talk. What 6-year-old wants to sit there and talk about their feelings? I don't.
Nope.
I only do it when I have to, which is more often than I'd like, but I think all of us feel that way. Can you tell me, Koryn, about one of the most rewarding experiences so far since you've opened This World's Ours?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a shock. It's the talking to parents. It's the connecting, because I am a parent. I've walked down this road. I definitely don't have all the answers or I don't have it all together. But I love being able to listen to parents and to have conversations because I get how challenging it is. I get all the extra meetings you're going to. I get the extra paperwork you're figuring out. I get trying to navigate the healthcare system and find a doctor and do all of that. Sometimes I see parents on their best days and sometimes I see them on their worst days. And that's okay. I want them to feel welcomed here. I mean, I cried at work yesterday. So if a parent comes in and cries, it's just, it's quite normal. So yeah, I kind of thought it would be looking at the kids or watching the staff, but the parents they're my people. So it's, building those connections is important to me.
That's amazing. And I know that I feel good every time I come into your center. The center has a variety of, I guess you would call them amenities or sensory experiences for children. They have a kitchen, they do cooking, just so many great activities. They also have a tiny little shop at the beginning when you walk in. And a wonderful PR friend of mine, Jen Wint, has written a book. I think it's called Josie's Busy Calendar.
It is.
And I purchased the book from you. And then I realized that Jen Wint had written it. And I didn't even realize until afterwards. And Jen Wint listens to this podcast. Yeah. But not only that, she is a fantastic person and an excellent PR professional and a great human being. So shout out to Jen. The book is excellent. And we've also picked up bath bombs with toys in the middle because sometimes my son doesn't want to take a bath. But with a bath bomb where he's going to get a toy in the middle, that's a nice little treat for him to have in the bathtub, and just little things that make a difference in the everyday that I think are important. So this is not a paid session. I am giving you my honest thoughts. I have looked everywhere for places where my son, where I feel my son is receiving benefits and where he's walking out a child feeling good. And that is what your center does for my son. So thank you.
Thank you.
It means a lot. So on that teary note, my son always says, and he said to Javier actually, my mommy cries when she's sad, but she also cries when she's happy. So that made me feel good because at least every time he sees me cry, he knows it's not sadness. I'm just a sensitive soul. So there you have it. Anyway. I end every episode with asking guests because I'm always curious about their favorite local nonprofits. So are there any that you'd like to highlight today, Koryn?
Yes, I do actually. One that is really near and dear to my heart is Spectrum Mother Support Society. It was founded by Sally Livingston in North Vancouver, who happened to be my daughter's foster mother before we adopted her. They support new moms that are caring for kids in challenging situations, whether they're single parent, immigrant, living in poverty, maybe have had a medical crisis. They put in caregivers and support and also provide baby items for them. She is an incredibly caring and loving individual, and I owe her the world. She was my daughter's mom before I was there. So if you ever have a chance to check them out or support them, they are a fantastic not-for-profit.
Okay.
The other one I'll just briefly mention is I do host Moms Meeting Moms events at my center. And so we always give the proceeds to Baby Go Round. And we also do a gear drive for them. And they support new parents have access to baby gear. As we know, it's gotten more and more expensive as time goes on to buy those things. And so they repurpose it and give it to parents who need it. Yeah, we love supporting them when we host these events. So those are my two ones for right now.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure to link to them on the episode as well as in the promotion. I'd like to thank you so much, Koryn, for being here today, for taking the time, for sharing your experience. For some of your experiences are personal regarding your family. Thank you for opening the center. Thank you for taking a dream and making it reality.
Thank you.
It changed a lot of lives. I think this is the most teary episode. I'm so embarrassed.
I cry all the time. So
listen, I'm a tough woman, but I can cry if I feel like it. Okay,
yeah.
There we go. So thank you for doing that. It was much needed. And maybe you can open more, please. And one in South Surrey would be wonderful. We've just moved to around that area.
Yeah.
Anyway, but thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Again, I would just encourage you to have a look at This World's Ours. It's in Vancouver. What is the cross street of This World's Ours?
Main and 10th Ave.
Main and 10th.
Yeah.
So have a look, go in for a tour, give Koryn an email, shoot her off an email. If you're wondering about if your child is neurodiverse, I encourage you to get that diagnosis early so that you can support your child. There are many, many forms of neurodiversity. We are fighting as moms, as many others are, to improve the system. And Koryn is one of those people that is fighting as hard as anyone. So thank you for being here. I so appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. If you're ever in Vancouver, please do come by. Our doors are always open. We love having people come in. So please take us up on that offer.
Thanks again.
Be kind and truly connect. You're listening to Rachel Thexton Connects.